welcome to Tripping on Legends. My name is Christopher Balzano.
And my name is Ella Balzano.
If you can hear her, Ella is actually off camera, but we hope that not off mic. I've got a different kind of audio setup today to see if I can improve the audio. Some people have commented, not rudely, that the audio on the podcast is not up to community standard. That's not the words that they use. That's the word I used when I listened to it. So I've tried several different ways to do it. Welcome to episode 134, Don't Play This Game. And if you are a fan of the show, or if you've listened to shows, episode is different on a few levels. The first level is this. We are not talking about legend that we're going to be able to trip, actually, like, on, going out to a location in Florida to trip this. This is one of our digital legend episodes. So that's already kind of something a little bit different. The second difference is that I am actively embracing here in our campfire on the crossroads the kind of chaotic nature of the way that I do things. I will be presenting these stories. As I always like to say, I'm continuing my path of not scripted, well-researched, but not scripted. And so, there's no editing along the way. What you're getting is my kind of initial thoughts on these legends, but then also our reactions to it. And oftentimes, and I think this is the beauty of the show, the way that my mind works in the moment in terms of breaking down some of these legends. The other thing that's going to be odd is, and this is part of the chaotic nature of it, for those of you who are listening to the podcast and actually listening to the podcast, we will be interacting with the community both on Facebook and on Instagram as we go, because this is one of those legends, because this is part digital legend trip and then part kind of nostalgia trip, right? A lot of people who I've spoken to over the last 2 weeks and kind of prepping this officially have spoken out about their adventures or their misadventures or their memories, more often than not, of these stories that we're going to talk about. And if people are piping in on any of our platforms, Instagram, it's at Spooky Balzano, Spooky Tripping, Facebook, facebook.com, /Tripping on Legends. If they are interacting with us, if they're telling us their ideas more than we usually do, we are going to actually interact with them. So if you are messaging us, we're going to be able to kind of, especially something specific. The other weird thing that we have going on tonight is we have started a conjuring altar. So we're going to post like when we set up the altar and lit it, but we actually have a conjuring altar set here, not for the Conjuring movie, which, I don't know, I do the ghost tour downtown Fort Myers. The number of times that people say The Conjuring is their favorite scary movie is crazy. People love that movie. Do you remember we did a movie-themed dinner night? We actually had Morgan over that night.
Yeah, I remember because right after the movie, she was too scared to go in the bathroom, so she made me go in it first. And I opened the door and I screamed at the top of my lungs, and she hit the ceiling and ran away.
I remember them. I remember Morgan especially being extremely scary. Extremely scared. She was scary too. It still is. But and of course that once it immediately leads to Auntie Lorene saying she loves the Babadook, even though after 17 viewings she still doesn't get what's going on in it. No, I am not talking about that. I'm actually talking about, we have next to you can see the kind of glare in my glasses. We have a little altar here set up to try to conjure one of the ghostly legends that we are talking about tonight. And it'll kind of become clear. Do we give it out now? I mean, you've already said it like 17 times, yelling it from the peanut gallery over there.
Peanut gallery? I'm part of the episode.
But should we wait until to kind of reveal who this altar is to? I think a lot of people who are following us on social media know it because I've posted several things about it. But we're talking about haunted video games. Now, the thing that brought this up to me was the idea that there were, I was scrolling through something, and someone said haunted video games, like the best scary games. And then almost immediately, kind of like having clicked on that and explored it a little bit, we had this it's kind of like came this rush of like, there's this mythology of video games turning on us. And that idea just started to roll around in my head. This idea that we are supposed to be playing the video games and the video games play us. And it made me really start to like wonder, like, okay, what is this connection? Like, why do we have, obviously I have my notes here, why do we have this set up about these video games? They're supposed to be harmless, and yet anyone who has a kid, anyone who was a kid who was part of this, I would like to say, I am obsessed with video games to the point that I don't play them. So both my kids and other people will tell you, I'll download a game and I'll play it, and then I'll immediately delete it, like within a week, because I realize I'm playing it too much. So I understand the addictive nature of games. I don't see it as much with my children, but I taught middle school for years. I used to call it what do you call it? What's the fighting one? Call of Duty eyes. Kids would come in and they'd have this like, coming to get you, Barbara, like zombie look about them, because they'd been up all night playing Call of Duty because the new version had come out, right? And in the same kind of way, I remember when NBA Jams came out, and I literally called in sick to work to complete the game, because you had to win, like, beat all 32 teams or whatever. I remember calling in sick, and the best part was I was living in the house with the person who was my boss, and she knew that I was, and she just went, kind of tipped her hat and said, this is to you. Go ahead, take the day off. So I understand the addictive nature. I avoid it. And I just thought, there's something deeper here. Something deeper to our need for them that would create these ghostly legends. And as we get, I've changed several different times the order that these are going in, because in doing more research, I began to actually freak myself out more, if that's possible. And so I really thought, so about a year ago, for Christmas, I got my son like one of those all-day video arcade passes, like play as long as you want. And we played for like a good 3 hours, I think. I think we extended it longer than we needed to. But Polybius was there. Have you ever heard of this game?
Polybius?
Polybius, yeah. Or Polybius, but I've always pronounced it Polybius. She's literally Googling it over there instead of saying...
How do you spell it?
P-O-L-Y, like Polybius. Polybius. I always pronounce it Polybius. If I'm pronouncing it wrong, I apologize. Now, here's the deal. We went to this arcade. It's in the middle of...
Oh, it's an urban legend.
It's actually kind of... Duh. She looked it up and went, it's an urban legend.
Not
Yeah,
nice.
of course it's an urban legend. That's why we're talking about it. I'll get to that eventually, but there was a cabinet at the arcade. This really, like, it's in, like, the worst part of Fort Myers, in the middle of nowhere, this arcade. And it was, kind of a cool setup, whatever, we had fun. But then I noticed that they had a Polybius, like, cabinet. And in the cabinet was, I think, Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man, so that wasn't it. And I thought, how friggin' obscure is that for this totally out-of-the-way place to have a cabinet? And then it kind of came up in my memories, and I was like, I've got to do this. This is the teacher in me. Audience, Ella, can you name the 5 basic reasons why folklore exists? Why we have folklore? Folklore serves... She's Googling it again, I can tell.
I'm definitely...
What function it has for us, why society is created. And before she starts to kind of cheat, I'm going to give away some of the answers. To preserve our history, right? Folklore is created to preserve our history. Folklore is created to unite people under a certain banner, right? So we pass it down. It's a heritage thing. It's created to remember a moment. It's created to teach a lesson. Here's where we start to get into where it makes for tonight. To carry forward cultural standards, Amanda says, yes. It is created, remember that, teach a lesson. Its major tenet, especially early on, was to explain the mysteries of the natural mythology, and then as an extension, folklore. Why does this river rise? Why does lightning strike? What's that rumble in the sky? And that becomes kind of our first level of exploration is, why is it? Oh, well, it's God crying. Well, the gods are angry. It rises because the tears are that's, and of course the more local you get, the more it goes from mythology to folklore. What is there in the natural world that we don't understand, right? Science's goal is to explain everything, is to kind of give us the playbook for all of the wonders and awe that we used to have, which means something else, because that spirit is still in us as humans, to question, to wonder. We just go from external to internal. So now we're talking the internal questions that we have are the ones that folklore addresses, right? Are what we're scared of, social things such as, why women shouldn't go to college, or, trust me, we should do a whole episode just on, women should not go to college. Video games and the attention, the loyalty that they demand, that they seem to kind of like take in our lives, the hold that they take, and especially the hold that they take on the young. If you think of all of the different kind of sets of myths and urban legends, they primarily, there's a whole fleet, there's a whole kind of section of ones that are old, but it's all about the young, because it's that A, teaching lessons thing, but then B, we are friggin' mystified by the youth. Ella and I have talked about several times on different episodes involving Blue Whale and the 13 Reasons Why curse and things like that. Like the idea that parents are baffled and scared crapless about their kids. When you think kids, if you were to just like lay down, like when I think of kids, I think about how often like video games kind of fall into that, right? They're an extension of apps. I cannot tell you how many people, TikTok went away for, an hour, and adults were flipping out, talking about how, well, I never downloaded it anyway. Younger people were flipping out because it wasn't there anymore, right? And there was a misunderstanding of exactly what it was. Kids are always on their phone.
It was free.
Kids were always, right? To fit the old man nature of my glasses, that reaction that we have in the spirit that creates that mythology comes from old guy, comes from old parents seeing different things, generationally different things, having the same fears, and kind of these myths, these curses becoming an extension of that. Or is this the way ghosts, darker things can enter our world now? I did a post about all this, kind of like every idea you can think about with an urban legend, like every excuse people give for why an urban legend is not an urban legend and is actually true. I found in my research of this. Take the TikTok guy. Who's the man who runs TikTok? The man from Singapore, who's not from China, he's from Singapore, right? And I actually read somewhere online, they asked him the question, if you put your earbuds in, can TikTok control your brain?
Obviously.
An absolutely ridiculous question. So ridiculous that people were then saying, well, of course it seems ridiculous. If it didn't seem ridiculous, then they could get away with it. This idea that the absurdity of some of these legends and the absolute ridiculousness of it is actually what makes it true. As if, like, it slides somewhere in between. If you're an X-Files fan, this is the best exact explanation. And then that last season before, kind of like the new episodes, they talked, or right before the, T-1000 or whatever went on, they had the idea of like, we make it seem insane because we're doing it. Like everything that you've seen has, and you're part of it, Fox, Mulder, is a misinformation campaign to hide the real story. That's what these stories kind of hit on. There's one more thing, I need to say it now, because I should have said it earlier. There's one more thing that makes this episode, we have never done this. We've talked about some pretty controversial episodes, and I refuse to use euphemisms and things like that in most of these explanations. I am putting a parental warning on this episode. I think my 15-year-old, almost 16-year-old daughter is fine, and I think most kids are, but we're going to get into one of these stories that is so horrific and graphic that, in addition to being extremely eerie because of that,
about Hero Brain?
it's what it talks about, and the nature of it is disturbing. So I'll give another warning when we're on that one, in case you happen to be listening to something, listening to this in the car with kids, which I don't think anyone in the world has ever listened to Tripping on Legends in the car with kids, or Tripping on Legends with kids in the car. Wow, that was hurtful. So I'm going to at least then say, like, clear cut, I will tell you again when that part of it comes up. We don't have lightning anymore. We have Fortnite. We don't have thunder, and the gods are playing bowling. We have Madden, right? I mean, just think about, like, for example, the Madden curse. Ellie, you ever heard of the Madden curse?
No.
Really? You've never heard of it? Do you know what Madden is?
Yes.
Madden's the football game that people who appear on the cover of Madden get injured. And it happened for like 10 years, some crazy kind of like thing like that. This stuff really gets sparked in the early 80s, and it, to some degree, makes perfect sense. If you are not an 80s kid, it might be really hard. If you are used to, like, okay, Chuck E. Cheese was there. I used to work at Chuck E. Cheese. You have Dave and Buster's. Dave and Buster's is not a video arcade. It is a entertainment, extravaganza location. It is not a video arcade. Video arcades in the 1980s, when they first came out, if you think about it, they were in a strip mall or in some kind of out of the way place. Oftentimes, they were reported to be, they weren't always, these dingy places where kids were doing drugs and smoking and maybe drinking and kind of putting coin after coin in an addictive nature into these machines with no end result, right? With no kind of they weren't investing their money, but even in like it's not even like they were playing, bless you, it's not even like they were playing the claw, or at least the claw maybe you get a toy out of. They were literally just standing there putting their money, staring into a box, and parents were friggin' baffled. We have to remember this is the time of, I hate this word, but in this case I think it's really important, things like the Satanic Panic. So while that I don't like the term because I think it's overused, I think you can at least mention in terms of the hysteria that was going on in the country. There was a legitimate, I just sent Ella something about how Pokemon is from Satan, right? To be an adult and to witness what was going on in a video arcade and to see the images that were on the screen, which were very simplistic at that time, and then getting increasingly more realistic, or at least digitally realistic, it was not a far leap to say that the devil or some evil entity could be speaking through these machines, especially when looking at the hypnotic nature of the children who were playing, coin after coin, swearing. We did some things on Slender Man, who I'll mention again later on, and this idea that in so much of the Slender Man mythology, the kids are alone, right? That original picture of the kids in the playground, there's no adults. It's just the kids. So many instances of whether it's the gentleman from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, whether it's the Shadow Man from the Amazing Stories episode, these are all these representations. The kids are kind of running free. Like, the parents are mentioned, but the kids kind of have an underground world of their own. That underground world was the subject of attack. And so now if there was whether it was a government trying to get information, like in Polybius, whether it was Berserker and Sad Satan, who were directly trying to hypnotize your kids and raise demons, there was a definite kind of feeling that there could be something dark behind these games. And we didn't grow out of that. My kids don't go anywhere, right? Like, we don't go to video arcades. Kids don't go to video arcades. First of all, I don't know anybody. I put something out there asking people to name video arcades near them. People couldn't name like a video arcade that they had gone to, and yet there was. And I'm talking about people who were in the city and suburbs and rural. There wasn't a lot of people who responded, and yet they were huge. So I can't say that they weren't. Dungeons and Dragons. I literally have Dungeons and Dragons right here, down here on my my list to mention here. So I'm totally with you, Amanda. We've substituted the video arcade for PlayStation, for Xbox, for online games, for phones. If you could see the way some of my students have to, you are going to get in trouble if you open that phone. They'll open their phone because they have to play that game. Yes, it's Snapchat. Yes, but also games that they've got going on. And there's a parallel, right? Like, there's a parallel between these things. Video arcades, for example, away from home, not under parent supervision, a lot of them. Kids running wild, not in the streets, but in front of these machines. I can tell you this for myself, and I have it good with my kids. That same sense of isolation, that same sense of not knowing what your kids are doing, are behind these doors, right? We put all the kind of tracking crap we can on our kids' phones and on their computers. They find the nooks and crannies. They're like water. They find the crap. And so what do they do? What are they doing when they shut those doors? That's nothing new, right? Kids isolate from their parents. But there is kind of like an extension, or there's kind of an extreme case of it today. Those doors close. The electronics go on. Think about the money. We talked about the coin after coin after coin. I don't know how many of you have bought a video game. The prices on them are crazy. My son works full-time, right? He's got this kind of like, he's got a job, works full-time, makes good money, and he wants to spend his money on video games. And so sometimes it's, on the game itself, and we look and it's like $70 for a new game. That's crazy. It's a crazy amount of money, especially if you're talking about kids who are 13, 14, 15, who don't have a job yet. That obsession. I talked about the Call of Duty eyes, right? The idea that Fortnite, and it's crazy because I have high schoolers and they'll still like talk about Fortnite when they think no one's looking. But that was a socially acceptable thing. Like, you needed to get that new skin, right? When there was some kind of weird update, like literally movies were being announced and huge things were on Fortnite. You had to be in it. You had to be part of the moment. Here's something interesting that I found out. So or discovered. One of the interesting themes that kept coming up time and time again in my research of these specific games was the government is using video games, these stand-up video games, arcade video games, to train and to hypnotize our kids, to brainwash our kids into doing something, or to kind of get them used to a certain situation. I think I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but the idea that we were using video games to train, a flight simulator is a video game. That they were actually using games that were kind of like Call of Duty to train soldiers. So that idea is kind of still there. But in the 80s, it was crazy. The government, and that was probably when the government was most trusted in the last 50, 60 years, was the 80s, right? The government was doing something nefarious to kind of control our kids, and they were using video games to do it. It's the whole premise of Polybius. I think the whole TikTok upheaval is an example of this. It's, although not a game, modern day games, and by modern day I'm still talking like older school. I remember there being legend or urban legend after urban legend, rumor after rumor, that Nintendo was created to spy on Americans so that they could get inside of our houses. They could get inside your kid's bedroom and see what they were doing. They could use that. Just think of all the what we think of the electronics in our house. I'm not even going to say her name because she talks every time I do. But, the little box over there that seems to always be listening, and when I whisper, she whispers back to me sometimes, and they're not sweet nothings. And so that idea of surveillance and using it to control, right there. Whereas we had the satanic panic back then, I think one of the ones that really kind of comes to my mind, like a modern equivalent in terms of home video games, would be school shootings and teen suicide and apathy. So we don't have the, necessarily anymore that the devil is coming for our children. What we do have is, I remember Columbine, right? Columbine, if it wasn't Marilyn Manson that did it, it was Doom. The fact that the kids played Doom, and that somehow Doom had caused them to recreate in their class, in their school, that atmosphere and complete the mission there. And that kind of idea and this sapping of apathy really kind of, sapping, which causes apathy, is something that these games are said to do. So in other words, our kids' depression is not because they have a disillusionment to the future. Do you have a disillusionment to the future?
Yeah.
Do you think the future is going to be crappity crap?
Yeah.
The time that they spend in the video games is given as the reason why they feel that way. So rather than they feel totally bored and so they're playing games for hours. I remember being obsessed, and I think part of the, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Does art imitate life? Does art create life? Two things that, oddly enough, coincide with a lot about what we're going to talk about tonight in terms of time. 1983, great movie. I would love to have a movie-themed dinner night on this. A movie called Nightmares came out, and it was an anthology horror. And someone actually pointed this out. I'm like, oh, I'm all over it. Trust me. One of them was called The Bishop of Battle, and it starred Emilio Estevez, a very young Emilio Estevez, as J.J. Cooney, who was the master of video games in L.A., and everyone wanted to be him. He was the equivalent of a superstar athlete or like a rock star, and the following that he had kind of showed this idea of people were obsessed with being the best. He had to get I'm telling this story to Ellen now because she's never heard this. So he had to be the best. He lost the high score on this Bishop of Battle game, right? And so he broke into the building to play the video game, and he got to the last level, the level that no one had ever gotten to before. Guess which level the number is?
13.
Excellent, level 13. Excellent, right? He gets to level 13, and what happens? The video game comes to life. And he's now having to fight the Bishop of Battle in the real world. And this idea that, the games were going to, come out of the box and attack us. And the second one, which is much more well-known, 1984. Some people consider it, one of the greatest movies of all time. It's called The Last Starfighter. Have you ever heard of it?
Sounds familiar.
Okay, so the premise of this movie, and believe it or not, I've never seen The Last Starfighter. Don't hate on me. The Last Starfighter, the premise of this is there are aliens out there who put video games on Earth to test who the best pilots are. Right? They drop them on all these planets, these things that kind of simulate the war that they are fighting. And if I'm getting the plot wrong, let me know. And then they go and abduct the human who is the best pilot because he's best at this video game. And he has to go off into space and fight this intergalactic war because he's the best at the video game. Would you love to be playing a video game and then all of a sudden someone's like, you're the best Pokemon person? You know what I'm saying? We're gonna send you to Pokemon World.
Yes.
So I think Jen Stone, love you, Jen, has a really good point. She says there are studies that showed for some traumatic events playing video games can help with PTSD syndrome. There are. I remember Jill, my ex, used to have. There was scientifically things set up because she worked at MIT, and she actually had. MIT was setting up experiments with Xbox and exercise equipment. And could you get someone to exercise more if they were playing Xbox and all this stuff like that. Like, there are things that clearly show that video games are not necessarily the tool of the devil. And yet, these stories arise. Okay, so now we're switching gears from kind of like explaining it to some of the creepy. And I wonder if you, the audience, or you, Ella, which is why I wanted you to be part of this, would play these games.
Okay.
So the first game is called Berserker. I know that you have never played this game because it originally came out in 1980 from Stern Electronics. A lot of the information I'm going to have for this, a lot of the details, comes from an article published in November 2015 by Kat Despera. So much of this came from her that I feel like I need to say, and I'll post her information in the credits of the notes. So, no, that's fine. This is crazy. So there's this game called Berserker, right? It was created in 1980 by a guy named Alan McNeil. So he was, for people who don't know the background of this game Berserker, he had a dream one night that he was playing. He woke up and he was in this futuristic world, and everything was sparse, and it was like a vast landscape, and it was totally flat, and robots were trying to come and kill him. And he had a gun, and he had to shoot all these aliens, and he was running through the territory like wait, what do they do on prep meeting? Pew pew pew.
Oh,
right, pew pew bang bang. It was bleak, it was flat, it was colorless, it was monochrome for the most part, and it was never ending, right? Like, so as he, no matter how many monsters no matter how many robots he killed, they just kept coming and coming and coming. Part of that kind of like, as they were starting to design the game, came from Fred Saberhagen had this whole science fiction series called The Berserkers, or featuring the Berserker, and it basically acted as like the inspiration along with the dream for this game. So if you've ever played the game, it's crazy how some of these early games can be so frustrating and simple but extremely hard to play. You went around with a gun shooting these robots, and if you got advanced enough, if you moved through it enough, you would start to encounter this character, which was just a big smiley head called Evil Otto. And Evil Otto kind of haunted you throughout the game. He would kind of follow you around, and then you would go through another level, and you'd leave Evil Otto behind, and then eventually he would come. And you were constantly, if the robots didn't come and get you, Evil Otto was going to do it. Well, in the early 80s, there started, like 82, 83, there started to be this rumor that Evil Otto was being used, like that Evil Otto was a real thing, right? That he was somehow trapped. It was an evil spirit who was trapped inside the game, and could kill you. And what it goes through all the levels of kind of demonic infestation, right, or demonic possession. It was obsession, and then he would start to take over the world a little bit, and then he would kind of invade your house until eventually you came back to the machine, you sacrificed yourself to the machine figuratively, and it was complete possession. This was backed up with actual deaths. So have you ever heard of a video game killing people? Now, what I'm telling you now, this part is not urban legend. This is stuff that actually happened. 1982, a guy by the name of Peter Bukowski in Calumet City, Illinois, went into Friar Tuck's game room. Now, Friar Tuck's is the exact opposite of what we are thinking. It was a total themed arcade, right? So rather than that smoky, dungy, smelly teen boy-filled atmosphere I was talking about earlier, this was like a family play center. To the point that if you brought your kids in as an adult, you got free coffee and donuts while your kids played video games. And it had a whole like Robin Hood medieval thing going on. And it was Peter's favorite video arcade because it was close to his house, right? 1982, the winter of 1982 had been horrible. Like record lows, record snowfalls in Illinois. And there was kind of just that whole winter depression thing going on. By April, it's like starting to thaw out, but not fully. It's still kind of snowy and slushy there. And he wakes up and he's depressed and he's bored and he's looking out over this, like, landscape of just kind of snow and slush and disgusting dreariness. The rumors say, that's amazing. The rumors say that the landscape he was looking out in his mind, he started to literally see Berserker in the real world. Like, to him, it looked like he was inside of the video game. 8 p.m., he walks into Friar Tuck's. Now, before that, he had played some video games at home. He had gone to visit his girlfriend. He had hung out with a friend of his, and then he made his way back to it. This was a man. This is a kid, right? He was 18. He was 5'10", 172 pounds, had never had a medical issue before in his life. When they were on the way, he said he was feeling run down. So him and his friend went to the store, they got some sodas, they downed the sodas. By the time they get to the arcade, he's saying he's feeling short of breath. He kind of starts having laboring breathing, and then he starts to play Berserker. In the next half hour, 45 minutes, he breaks all the records that have ever been on that cabinet, right? He puts his initials in, steps away from the game, and falls dead.
Whoa. Okay.
Boom, right there. Like, they tried to revive him. Nope, he was dead on arrival. And so people began to say, the video game killed him. That Evil Otto, he had kind of sold something to Evil Otto, sold a soul to Evil Otto, whatever, and that it had come to take him, and boom, video games can now kill you. In reality, he had, I'm going to try to pronounce these names. It was initially thought that he had pediatric cardiomyopathy, which is suffered by many. So in other words, he already had the condition. They said that he has aromatic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. I think I did a pretty good job pronouncing that. Which is essentially like your heart muscles in your heart die, and they're replaced either by scar tissue or by fat. And you don't go diagnosed. And so there have been athletes over the years who have died from this, like on the court, and it was never diagnosed. They could tell from his echocardiogram or whatever that he had a heart attack 3 weeks earlier. So an 18-year-old, perfectly healthy, had a heart attack 3 weeks before that. Everybody flipped friggin' out. Everyone thought that that's it. This is the game kills you. Now there were all of these sicknesses that started to be reported from people who had played the game. People were saying that there was a direct correlation between suicide reports and like rakes, like how much Berserker was being played in certain cities, and everyone started to pull the game. Right? Like, it was a big enough of an uproar that, and this is without people banning it. This is without Karens complaining, going, get out of Berserker. People were literally pulling the game because they didn't want to be the next place where some kid dropped dead. What's the one place that didn't take their game out?
The place where he died?
Friar Tuck's. Fast forward, I think less than a year later? No, like 5-6 years later. That's a huge difference. Because I'm looking, like, I actually don't have the date of this. I just have the date of, okay. There was a kid named Edward Clark who was a rough kid. Always in trouble, really rough life. He was 17 years old. As he was 17 years old, he was able to enlist as a Green Beret. Now, I checked that fact out several places. I don't know how a 17-year-old directly enlists as being a Green Beret. But he had then started some kind of training, and he was turning his life around. I asked probably 40 of my kids over the last week, 40 of my students, and I'm going to ask Ellen now and see if she knows the answer to this. You walk into a video arcade. You go to the game that you want to play.
Right.
You notice that there's no one at the game that you are going to play, but there are 2 quarters on the screen, like 2 quarters, like on the top of the machine.
Right.
What do? You
put my own quarters in.
Ella says she put her own quarters in. Like,
I don't mess with that shit.
Okay, don't
Am I
mess with
allowed
what?
to curse on here?
Yeah, well, no, but that's okay. You shouldn't curse anyway, not on here.
Sorry.
You don't What do you say? You don't want to steal the money? Is
That's
that
bad
weird?
juju.
To steal the money?
Yeah.
Okay. So she has absolutely no idea what that situation is, as did all 40 of my students, had no idea. Most of them, they're not nearly as nice as Ella. They said, I take the money and I put it in and I play. Some stole the money, some did, a few did what Ella did, which is say, like, oh, I just put my own money in. None of them know the code of the quarters. A quarter placed on that game cabinet means someone has the next game. And even if that person is in the bathroom, you respect the quarter. You do not have the next game. You put your quarter on the other end of the game and you wait for the first person to be finished and then you have next on the game. Eddie, not a big fan of rules. He didn't steal the coins, but he started to play the game, which completely pissed off young Pedro Roberts, 16, who had a complete void. He was void of empathy. Like, records about him before this said he was void of empathy. He is a total troublemaker. He's already getting in trouble with the law, and they start a fight because they're his quarters, right? And Edward broke the code, so they start to kind of physically get at it. They're both thrown out. What happens is they let Pedro out, and then they wait a little bit of time and they let Edward and his friends leave. They tell them go a different way, but Clark doesn't. Edward Clark doesn't. He just goes the same way. He's ambushed by Robert and his friends, and he's stabbed multiple times.
Yeah.
This is over a video game. This is over you playing the video game when I had my quarters there. Different people said he had taken the knife out and threatened him in the face. Like, there's a lot of folklore about what exactly happened. He stabbed him, and Edwards is like, he refuses to go to the hospital because he's playing the tough guy, and boom, he dies of the stab wounds, like in the back of the car when his friends finally decide to take him. Because back then, or even now, if you have a stab wound, it has to go reported. He had been turning his life around. He didn't want the army to know that he had gotten into trouble. Roberts was convicted May 1990. That's why I'm saying it happened in the mid-'80s. Of 11 years for they considered it, he pleaded down to self-defense, saying that Edwards had attacked him first in the thing. He's sent to, now this is the crazy part, he's sent to Marion Prison, which at that time had just opened up as an alternative to Alcatraz. So in this Marion Prison in Illinois were the worst of the worst criminals. Like, notoriously, like, insane, criminally insane, like, locked up 24 hours a day type of criminals in this prison. And there's this not even 20-year-old who killed somebody over a video game.
Right.
The story continues. Marion Prison and Pedro Roberts in particular were part of the CARE program, which was the Control and Rehabilitation Effort program, which was using, any of you guys who have seen Clockwork Orange, which was using sensory deprivation, which was using brainwashing, mind control to not only kind of keep prisoners secure and timid, but also to experiment for the government. Now, once again, is this a government conspiracy or is it not a government conspiracy? There are people who then were saying that Evil Otto was specifically designed, very cool, was specifically designed to actually recruit people into this more sophisticated program. Either way, there were reports after that, all throughout the country, of Berserker games popping up in arcades that had never ordered them. People were literally, owners were going out, they would come back, and there would be a Berserker game plugged in. There were reports of people having the Berserker cabinet unplugged, like in a repair bin, and it would just turn on and start playing itself. That sometimes at night, like nighttime security, think of like Five Nights at Freddy's, every single light in an arcade would go out, and the only thing that would be playing would be Evil Otto's face laughing. Crazy. Led to this whole idea of like there was something trapped in it. What's a modern day equivalent of that? Herobrine. This one, also known as him exclamation point. Like I heard a lot of references to him exclamation point. If you don't have kids, you may not know the obsession that was Minecraft. Right? Even my kids who are not video game people, how much did you play Minecraft?
A lot. When I was younger,
yeah,
lot.
like give me like an hours in a day. At its height,
day.
Hours in a day, how long would you play?
Hours in a day, you have to spend like a lot of time on there to like get stuff done. I'd say like 4 hours. 4
hours a day playing one video game, which had no benefit other than making stuff. Once again, it's not like there was an ultimate goal. Could you ever win
children
at Minecraft?
They yearn for the mine.
They still do, right? Like
so
joke
Jack
in my
Black
class.
in the new Minecraft movie.
Is there's a new Minecraft movie?
Seriously?
Seriously?
You haven't seen it?
Seriously, no.
Oh my god, Jack Black plays Steve.
Okay, so we're talking about like years after it reached its prime. Like it's not in its prime anymore.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's coming back again. It would make sense when you watched, and you could watch videos of people, and the obsessed, even more than any other game that I can think of, and Ella might correct me on this, there were videos of people watching other people play Minecraft.
I guess so.
Okay, literally, that guy and that girl that used to always watch Pat and Jen, okay? Then there were videos of people watching videos of people playing Minecraft. So then you would like duet or whatever, like you commenting on the people who were commenting on them. It was crazy. And I think Ella hit it right when she said it's the perfect model of a video game because you have to, anything you want to do has to take time. Like I remember watching my kids play and being like, well, why aren't you shooting anything? Why aren't you like running around doing stuff? And it's like, I'm building a house for 23 hours. And it just seemed like they were doing the same thing over and over again. They were breaking things over here and so if you've never played it, there really is like a foreign aspect to it. I mentioned this to my students. Even today I said it again, and I'll tell you from the quarterback of the football team to the person who plays flute in the band. Right? That's just kind of like scanning the whole, like, you know, what you think of like the flautists. There was a collective gasp just at the image, and everyone knew the name, Herobrine. Ella, do you want to tell us what you know about Herobrine?
Is that like...
All right, you gotta be clear.
Is that he was like this like entity in like Minecraft, and you could like summon him, and he would like challenge you to like these games.
Ooh, well, this is something I've never heard. Go ahead, talk about the challenging of the games.
In some like things, you'd have to like complete these challenges, but then sometimes it would just be like, and he comes and he corrupts your game and like hacks your stuff, and then it like makes your skin Herobrine, and like it was just all this like stupid stuff.
So when you say make your skin Herobrine, almost kind of like possession. Like he takes over. You don't mean skin. You mean like the skin of the game, right?
Well, like not in like real life.
Yeah.
But like when you play Minecraft, you have like a skin of like what your character looks like in the game, and it would take control of that, like make it Herobrine.
So possession, essentially. Like you're looking at like the video game
like
equivalent.
This guy.
No, I'm saying, but like that's the equivalent. Like if I was to say like he takes over your, you just literally said he takes over your body.
I didn't say that. I said he just takes the skin.
He doesn't take over your body. He just takes the skin. Got it.
But I don't even really remember because I was not that kind of girl. I was like...
She was not that kind of girl. I raised her right.
I was building houses. Like, I did not care about Herobrine.
And the crazy thing was that, and the interesting was, the kids reacted. Kids started talking, telling stories like you were just saying, and then they would be like, oh, but I never did it. I don't know. No one ever actually reported... No one has ever had a first-hand experience. There's no one who comes flat out and says they have had a first-hand experience with this... except for the first person who reported it. So in 2010, on a 4chan, I love 4chan. I have to install it and live there. It just seems like all these
no.
legends come out of there.
I'm gonna tell you, the Fortune is a very bad place.
No, I get it. I get it from the stories that I get. Trust me, I'm a very bad man. So, the author of this post had been just kind of walking around creating a new world, right? Like filling it with whatever you fill worlds in Minecraft. And he saw something weird in the distance. And
I'm gonna reenact it.
he originally thought that it was, I know, do you have a Steve somewhere here? No?
I've
You used to. Where? That's mine. Where is it?
Somewhere in my room. You're welcome to go look for it.
This thing off in the distance, this white thing off in the distance. And as it got closer, he thought it was like a sheep, or it was like, as it got closer, he noticed that it was another player staring at him. And there were these, it looked like Steve, who is like the default skin, as you say. Only it had these white blank eyes, and it was just staring at him. Now, I need a little bit of clarification, not being a Minecraft person myself. If you make a world, it's your world, right? People just can't appear in it, right?
No. You have
Unless
to,
you
like,
invite them in.
You have to, there's actually like a specific thing where like you have to have them on a different, you have to like on Xbox Live, you have to have them friended on Xbox Live, or you have to be in their proximity. So you like if you want to play online, you have to friend them, like you have to become friends with them on Xbox and then go on it and like allow them to be in it.
Yeah.
Or if you're right next to them, it will show if you make, so you can't do, somebody can't join your game unless you make it public.
Okay, that's the thing that I'm getting at, right?
Like they can't do it if you don't do
So for there to be this random person staring at him who looked like him, really, right? Like, because if he's Steve and he's looking at Steve, it looks like him, only with these white eyes, totally devoid of pupils, like just staring at him. Then all of a sudden, the structures that this guy had built in this new world just started to randomly disappear. And the best part was, he got a what was I just about to say? Oh my word.
a message.
No, not yet. Oh, he got a screenshot. So the screenshot that everyone sees, that original screenshot, is from this person who had posted on 4chan. The internet exploded. Like, Minecraft was perfect for kind of this kind of legend, right? Because the story that came out, the first story was that it was, so the person who created Minecraft's name was Notch.
Yes.
Like, that's his.
Yes,
Why are you laughing at when I say it?
Because you say these things like I don't know.
No, I'm asking, like, his name was Notch.
Yes.
Supposedly, this was his dead brother, and that one of two things. He had never, that he had built it as a tribute to his brother. Like, inside of the programming, he had made it so that this kind of creature would come out, this ghost would come out in honor of his brother. The other one was that his brother was jealous. And that once Notch had created this game, his brother, who was haunting him, jumped into the game. Now, the story reeked enough of familiar folklore that it made sense. And people started to say that this was a literal ghost in the machine. That somehow Notch's brother had been trapped inside the game and could move freely from world to world to world, and in doing that could control the user as well. That there now all of a sudden there had started to be reports of the game turning on by itself, of world switching, of screens turning completely black with just Herobrine staring at them. The post vanished. So what this guy, or what the person posted, had completely disappeared. And all of a sudden, in another post, a while later, the same man started posting that he was getting inundated with emails from someone named Herobrine. And the emails were saying, I am Herobrine, and then just one word, stop.
Okay.
Now, we did that Cursed Calls episode.
Oh.
Do you remember how freaked out we got that we
Yeah.
were going to get people that, because a lot of them was you start getting text messages that said stop?
Yeah.
It completely freaked out. Now, since then, Notch has come out because he kind of gave an ambiguous answer. Like someone said, "Do you have a brother?" And he said something to the effect of, "Well, not anymore," or something like that. That he had never had a brother. He never had anyone die like that.
So why would he be all mysterious about it?
I think because it started to take on a life of its own, right? And it was mythology inside Minecraft, right? Like all of these kids I talked about know it. They were playing the game, maybe not to encounter Herobrine, but it was one of the things. As a matter of fact, they said people started creating their own skins that were Herobrine skins. People started writing fan fiction. There are books out.
Herobrine?
Yeah, there are books out. And then people started writing false accounts. Like all of a sudden, all of these people were posting of their encounters with Herobrine. And it's interesting because Notch came out, and he said, we don't have a Slender Man. He can't exist in this universe. So it makes sense that Notch would acknowledge that Minecraft was primed for an evil spirit. Because what started to happen was people, along with their sightings of him, would say that weird things started to happen in their house. So if you saw Herobrine, your computer would get all crazy, right? Now, here's the crazy thing. People were playing on, like you said, the Xbox. They said their computers, which were not playing Minecraft, would start to go crazy. And they would start to get messages from Herobrine on their computer. They would start to get emails. It was not necessarily accounts that were attached to their Minecraft. I've never heard of any report of him in real life, but in honor of Bishop of Battle,
yeah,
tonight we created a Herobrine altar. So burning right here next to me, Instagram you'll be able to see this but I can't move my whole computer. We have a little altar here built using the specifications of several of my students, how to build the altar. We ran into a little bit of disaster trying to build it. And the crazy thing was we lit the candles, and the candles went out, right? So we had to get like new candles for it. So it said that if you want to summon him, and there are successful reports of this all online, if you want to summon him, you build this altar. Now, do you know the dimensions of the altar? Seeing you've helped me build it?
It's 2x4.
No, it's 3x3 gold bricks.
That's what I freaking said. 3x3 gold bricks, and then you put.
Then you take one gold. You have to take one of the gold bricks out. You have to break it.
Nether rack.
You make a nether rack, which I built.
And then you light red torches.
Great for torches. So we've got the torches lit. We're hoping that Herobrine makes an appearance on the show tonight.
So
the crazy thing about this is that they do, like you're saying, they do put Slender Man in the game. Like Enderman is Slender Man, and they put him in the game. For those of you guys who don't know who Slender Man is, what the hell are you doing?
Who are you?
Listening to this show if you don't know who Slender Man is. But in 2009, it's a character created by Victor Surge. We've already referenced him several times. Enderman kind of makes his first appearance in 2011. So if we think about all of the dates on this, all this happens very quickly, right? Like 2010, we have the first reports of Herobrine. He hits hard. Then all of a sudden, they create a kind of substitute of him, which has already gained popularity. But here's the crazy thing: he was never created. All of these people who reported seeing him, including that first person. Okay, so maybe the first person is just a fraud, but what an oddly specific fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Then people started seeing him all over the place on Minecraft, but he never existed. There's nothing that has ever existed in the program. They've now come out and officially said, no program that ever until people started making their own worlds and own skins with him, there was nothing in the programming that contained a figure remotely like Herobrine, other than Steve, who obviously looks, just like him. So where did he come from? Again, we have I agree with you, no such thing as bad publicity, Amanda. We have this idea of, well, it's obviously a fake. Everyone who along the way was talking about it was a fake. And yet, that's not what the younger generation thinks. Like, they legitimately think that the game was haunted. And that there was a possibility that a human was trapped in there. And what do they say? No. So they wouldn't lose money, and so parents would make the kids, they made Notch like lie about his dead brother, and right, you can't kill an urban legend with logic. It defies that. They literally were like, making excuses as to why this was not an urban legend that made no sense. That were traditional. That were the same things of like, no, the reason why the guy with the hook, they never talk about it, is because they didn't want the hospital that got him released to be sued. It's the same kind of thing. Modern updates, like if you get an update for Minecraft, always say in the notes, Herobrine removed.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? Have you seen that before?
Yeah, where it has there's when on the opening screen, there's the title and there's a note on the side.
Yeah.
It has that.
So when it's updated, just like your phone, when it's updated, it'll tell you what it did differently. It always says Herobrine removed. So he kind of threw that forward, this mythology that he keeps coming back.
I always come back.
I always come back.
Oh my god, that's really awesome.
Okay, Polybius. You looked it up really quickly. What did you find?
It's an urban legend. It's based on a Greek figure, is what I found.
Nope, not at all.
Well, it said that.
You said a Greek figure. Yeah, he was a philosopher, I believe, and like a writer and philosopher.
Yeah. I didn't really look much up behind the side.
So
I was reading The Raven Cycle. Best book series ever, guys. Read it.
1981. A company by the name of Sindenschlossen. So if my medical terminology is not horrible,
Bob.
Sindenschlossen. I honestly thought this was going to be the cornerstone story. Like I thought that we was going to work up to Polybius. That's not the way it worked. There's one. In other words, there's another one after this. The idea is in 1998, there was an article in coinop.org that was a ROM file, like CD-ROM. It was a ROM file from 1981. So someone had found this old file that was now like over 15 years old, and they had played it, and that this game was hypnotic, right? Like they found themselves being completely entranced by it. They had kind of started to post about it, and people had started to respond that they had played it themselves, and then weird things were involved in it. And then it was kind of just like left open like that. And then the man said he had to go to Ukraine. So imagine Ukraine in 1998, very different idea of it, to follow up on the story, and then vanished off the face of the planet. And that's the way Polybius hung. There was a video game. I found it was from 1981. Weird things were out there about it. I'm going to go explore it more because I'm tracking the story down into the Ukraine and Russia, and whoop, off the face of the planet. And so it left this huge...
Must have been Herobrine.
Predates Herobrine by like 2 decades, right?
Probably.
Huge question mark. What do I always say? You turn a question mark around, it turns into a hook. So when the 2003 Game Pro article came out called Secret and Lies, it went into more depth. So the story goes that in 1981, a company named Sindenschlossen, which means mind wiping in German,
right? Not suspicious.
Came out with this game. And it was kind of crazy because it didn't really have excellent gameplay, but kids were becoming addicted to it. They were lining up literally around the corner. All the other games weren't being played. They finally had to like cut off from certain people. Like, nope, you guys can't come in unless you're playing a game. People who played the game started to experience time slips. So they would wake up in places and have no idea where the last like 5 hours had gone. Memory loss of the moments they were playing the game, but then also they started to forget things that had happened in the past. Unexplained violence. They would just start flipping out on people. So they'd play the game, they'd leave the arcade, and they would bash someone's head in.
Oh, okay.
Or they would get into a fight. Kids were getting suspended from school because they would just be sitting in a seat, and all of a sudden they'd have this like blank expression, and then they would start to like go crazy on people. Paranoia, insomnia, sickness, headaches, pretty much all the things that
Sounds
go
like
with
that damn
puberty,
phone.
but all intensified, right? What'd you say?
I said something like that damn phone.
What do you mean?
But you know, people are like, it's that because of that damn phone.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Okay, whatever. Whatever.
Then the other reports started to come out that in addition to all of this and all these people reporting things, Men in Black
Bruh.
would show up, and this was only happening in the suburbs of Seattle. I'm sorry, Portland, Oregon. People would show up. Men in Black would show up, mine, I should say, the computer for information, and then leave. And even the people who were running the arcades, like the owners of the arcades, didn't know what these guys were doing. They would come in, and before the owner could say anything, they had opened up the cabinet. They had kind of like started to get information from it, like on a computer. They'd unhook the computer and they would take off. I love this quote about it. By the way, that GamePro article, which was originally written to dispel the rumor, said it could not say it didn't exist, which led fuel to that it did. So in other words, it was not saying it existed, but they could not find evidence that had not existed. I love this quote about it, which says, what H.P. Lovecraft's Necronomicon is for books, Polybius is for video gamers. That was by a guy named Joe Skekirk. This idea that it has this mythology behind it and has this weird kind of urban legend history that everyone remembers it, but no one can remember any details, right? That people have this kind of odd, like, yeah, I kind of remember that, or I remember the lettering. I mean, I've shown the cabinets and that, like, very specific script that is all over it. But the weird thing is that if kids were flipping out, if there was violence attached to it in the early 1980s, and if it was that impactful, there are no news reports that mention the game at all. There are no trade magazines that talk about the creation of the game. There's no news of like weird things having happened. Like back then, all of the stuff seems to be recreated now. Like someone read an article and it had said that. And more importantly, no one can remember what the game actually was, like how the game was played. There was a great thing called the Polybius conspiracy. I absolutely loved it. I first heard about this when I used to listen to a lot. In doing this episode, I found some old, like really cool podcasts that I used to listen to that I don't listen to anymore. One was Offbeat Oregon History, which posted it in January of 2017. This whole and they referenced Beaverton, Oregon. They talk about this entire story and laid it out. And I thought, this is amazing. Then in October of 2017, and here's really where the story kind of takes off. It was meant to be, they described it as meant to be a digital campfire, which I love. A podcast called The Polybius Conspiracy premiered. And it was started by Bobby Feldstein. It was created by Jay Frechette and Todd Ludo. And it featured this guy named Bobby Feldstein, who was a player in Coin Kingdom in Oregon, right? His was in Portland, like it's another suburb of Portland, and this whole podcast talks about how he kind of used to play this game, became obsessed with it, and then one day he was playing and he walks out and he loses hours of time. And all of a sudden, he gets picked up by these men in black who take him to this, like, underground dungeon where he's now, like, strapped down and they're gathering information from his mind. He's then kind of, like, the people leave for a little bit. He's left alone for hours by himself. And this mangled little boy helps him escape. And he eventually gets home. No one believes his story. And so this is him, like, years later. This happened in the early 1980s. Years later, him trying to finally come to terms with this episode of his life. The podcast is amazing. I love it. If you love the what's the one that we listen to?
Magnus Archives?
The Magnus Archives. You would love this podcast.
Oh my god, you hear my voice?
Right? It's totally set up as in, it's very Blair Witch. You don't know whether it's real, whether it's fake. this has seeped into all different forms. It's been on The Simpsons, it's been on the Goldbergs, Nine Inch Nails wrote a song about it, Paper Girls featured it. The podcast is amazing because it offers it as a story for you to solve, right? As if there's something like if you just connect the dots, you can get it. And the overwhelming thing of it is the government, that same government that put those, it's kind of an extension of that Marion Prison Project. They were gathering some kind of information about us. It's our worst fear, right? The idea that we're doing something and someone's watching us back, and it's the government. And there's something creepy to that, right? Because then reports started to come out that the government, through this, the government was allowing aliens access to the information, like it was literally running the experiment for aliens, or that there had been a deep government about kind of of cultists who were using this information, who were using like the technology to specifically brainwash people to get a certain wavelength to raise Satan.
Right.
You say right as if you don't believe that. Why wouldn't you believe that? Amazing. Why wouldn't you believe that?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't know.
Like, why does that seem crazy?
It just sounds bizarre.
It sounds like a made-up story, right? Like, that it's actually kind of like one of those things where it's like, well, oh, like, the government wouldn't do that, there are no cults, but we've kind of seen evidence of weird things going on. Now, whether the Dark Lord actually can be raised by this, we don't know, but the idea of the attempt is kind of what freaks people out, right? Like, it's this very weird line. It's perfect enough, and the podcast really feeds this. It's perfectly set up enough that you go, could it be? Right? Like, no matter every logical bone, pop, 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 saying that it's not real, there's still that line through it of, but what if? Like, when they ask people in a court hearing, like, is it possible? Well, yeah, but is it possible? We kind of live in that line. Ella, I want you to do me a huge favor. I want you to bring those lights down a little bit for our last one.
Oh, I'm actually good.
Because this is the one that, as I there's not much that freaks me out. And I kind of feel like I might even cut this up into 2 episodes and do kind of like Sad Satan as its own kind of episode, right? Like, kind of like cut it up so that we do it, but I'll do it right now.
Can we do a quick break to show everybody my Legos?
No.
Okay.
We'll do that afterwards if you want. You can do it on your own. If you have kids listening, send them away. This is not that kind of ghost story. Bring those lights down just a little bit.
I'm not bringing them down, I'm telling you.
Most of the stories that we're talking about tonight, there is this line of, do they exist, do they not exist? Berserker's a real game, we know that. A lot of the ones I came across were real games, and they were just horror games. And so because they were horror games, they fed the idea of, oh, well, like, it's haunted, but, it's the same kind of thing, like, oh, no, well, I heard that no paranormal activity is a real movie, it's real footage. So it kind of, just by the nature of what it was talking about, kind of gave the idea, or fed the idea, that there could be something nefarious, there could be something evil there. Sad Satan is one of those games where people question whether it existed. People are not sure that as a game it ever existed, or it was ever played by anybody. And it seems to be one of those things where people, we talked about fan fiction with Herobrine. This is kind of taken to another extreme. I may have talked about this on the show, and the best part is that, in doing the research, it wasn't until halfway through me doing the Sad Satan that I had to smack myself upside the head. I think my son was with me, and I immediately said what the game was called, and he got the reference almost immediately. And I did all this research. No, it's not a rock song. So Part of the rabbit hole that I fell down in doing this is I rediscovered JK Cinema. And if you Google that, or specifically if you go to YouTube and you type in JK Cinema Urban Legends, you will find what could be one of the most influential works of art on my development of to what I do. Like, I used to watch these at work, and they would freak me out. And they didn't have quite the same effect of freaking me out when I watched them, because they changed the music because of copyright issues. But they still, I'm getting a little bit of a chill thinking about them now. So I was sick one day, and I was watching one specific episode. As I tell the story, Elle's going to remember this story. I was watching
I
one.
know what it is already when you say you're sick.
No, you don't. You know it because you're Googling it. I can see your thumbs flying away.
Buddy.
I'm sick.
It's gonna be freaking the one of Stairway to Heaven back.
Exactly. There was one segment they had where they were talking about the backwards messages in Stairway to Heaven. And one of the lines ends with "Sad Satan." Now, I hit a fever. It had to have been in the hundreds that night. And I started having, like, fever dream hallucinations. And all I kept going through my mind was backwards masking of Stairway to Heaven. Like, the whole, like, Sad Satan. I think Sweet Satan begins with, right? It's got 666. You can listen to it for yourself. It's pretty famous. Like, I woke up from that fever dream and was scared crapless for weeks. Like, not that Satan, but it was like the weird mind play that it had on me. Sad Satan hits that same kind of vibe. It supposedly was created via Microsoft Windows in 2015. So the story goes like this. There was a YouTube channel called Obscure Horror Corner. Have you ever been there?
Obscure Horror Corner?
Yeah.
I have not been there.
And there was a guy who was running that named Jamie, who found and posted this game that he found on the dark web. Now, the person who kind of created it, or who had posted it on the dark web's name was ZK. So what you are doing in this game is it's like a monochrome corridor, so just black and white. Every once in a while, like like a yellow strip will kind of like flash through where you are. It's got that liminal space thing going on, only it's all digital. So imagine Berserker meets the back rooms.
Right.
And all you're doing is walking around. It's so dark, it doesn't even look like corridors. You're literally just like, you're seeing these faint white lines against a screen of black. There's no gameplay. There's no progress, right? You just walk. You walk, and there seems to be things in the distance, and you walk towards them. And so this YouTube video is just someone playing the game. As it goes on, the person playing kind of wobbles. Like the player, not the person shooting it, but the player. You as a player wobble. You are continuously disrupted by graphic images on the screen, right? So all of a sudden, in like a jump scare kind of thing, these extremely graphic images will appear. In the background, you hear backwards messaging, so like songs playing backwards. You hear the 1927, it's the Doors version of a 1927 song called Play Little Mahogany. It's the Alabama song. It's from a play called Play Little Mahogany, and the song is about prostitutes who spend all day drinking and trying to get customers. Now, I did not know what that song was until I heard it.
Right.
For those of you guys who are on Facebook and not Instagram, you know what I posted about that song. But then it will all of a sudden start playing backwards as well. The backwards version of Stairway to Heaven plays. And what happens is it'll play, and sometimes it'll just sound like mumbling, and then all of a sudden it will screech up. There's backwards, like you start to hear like kids screaming, and then you'll hear it backwards as well. There's a music box that plays, and it's got this really kind of creepy thing to it. There's all these distorted voices you can't quite get what they are. And as you're doing this, images of famous child abusers flash on the screen, including Jimmy Savile, who's famous, who sexually molested, they say, up to 400 kids. There's a guy named Rolf Harris, another person who kind of became famous in a Santa outfit, like with kids all around him. Zumoto Muzazaki, who, in addition to abducting children, murdered them and ate them. And then then all of a sudden there'll be a picture of Margaret Thatcher, or JFK, or Andres Escobar, the soccer player, or Lady Justice. You start to hear what sounds like gasping, right? Like a kid gasping. Sometimes those pictures appear and the eyes will be like crossed out, or the mouths will be blackened out. Probably the craziest for me is that all of a sudden underneath it will start to be the number stations, which has appeared, the idea of the number stations has appeared in several of these different haunted games. You know what number stations are?
No.
So back in the day, to hide, like spies communicating with each other, they would hide codes.
Oh, yeah.
And so they would just start playing these numbers. And then other spies knew what was being said and knew what the numbers meant and stuff like that. And so they would that's how they communicated. But they've also been connected to, once again, mind control, cultists sending information throughout, hypnotism, like trying to literally like brainwash you to be part of these cults and to commit acts of crime using these number stations. We have to do an episode just on number stations. Then all of a sudden,
right here,
the creepy kids appear in the game. There seems to be one kid who's older, who's shy, who seems to be a leader, and they're just standing in place. The kids are just standing. Some of them are groaning. Then all of a sudden, they start to follow you all around. And for the first time in the game, you start to lose power. Like they have like attack points, like they're hitting you and taking your power away, and then you die. Before you die, there's a lot of screaming. Like there's this like weird screaming, but it's not screaming of you, the character. There seems to be screaming as if like almost like screaming in victory. So that's what was posted, right? It was a web series. It lasted 5 hours. I'm sorry, 1 hour total. It was 5 episodes. It was released on this. And the person who originally posted it, right? So this, what was it? Gay, obscure horror corner said that they were presenting an edited version of it. So that crazy stuff that you saw, that was the edited version of it, right?
Oh.
Then,
What's that?
then ZK goes on, and he goes on 4chan, and he attacks the clean version, right? And this is now what they call the clone version that we're talking about. He attacks the clean version, and he has links to download the game. So embedded in his messages are these links to download the game. When you download the game, it puts a virus on your computer, right? But there are rumors that it does other stuff as well. So it puts a Trojan horse on your computer. It puts child pornography. It puts massacred bodies, like files like that, right? So in addition to taking control of your computer, remember we were just talking about that, we were watching that Criminal Minds episode where they put all that horrible stuff because it's like, well, now you can't report it because you've got it on your computer too. That kind of idea, except the other part of this is that the kids are trapped in the game. The only way for the kids to get out is to actually transfer them to another computer. So this virus was actually used to release the kids into the world.
Right.
And that these had been... Now, so all of a sudden rumors pop up, right? Like, because there's a lot of information here that has to do with and certain messages, like one of the messages was like follow the trail that would appear.
Yeah.
And so the idea was that there was someone who was trying to talk about human trafficking and expose a ring, and that maybe there was a little magic involved as well. And this was the only way that they could do it. They could kind of get the information out there was by creating this game, and that people who knew and could help were understanding like the messages that were in the game. But then there was also this other kind of, and Jamie came out with more information. He said that, all this weird stuff would pop up on his computer whenever he played it. Da, da, da. There was another idea that the government was using the game to track sex abusers, right? So children who were into child pornography, maybe even trafficking, they wanted to play this game. And so if you downloaded this game and played it, it's because you were messed up. And so they were using this to cross-reference with sex offenders to kind of track people's activity and then find out who they were talking to. But then there's another, so this is where it starts, like this is where urban legends come out of. No, that the government was using it to track these people, and that actually Sad Satan was meant to distract them. So in other words, it was meant for the government to click on all those bad links and get all those viruses so that the bad guys could track the government.
Okay.
There's no proof that any of this ever existed.
Penelope Garcia would not.
There's no proof. Penelope Garcia would be able to tell us whether or not. There's no proof that this ever existed, that other than the videos, which have been taken down and they pop up every once in a while again, that the game itself ever actually existed, and that the screenshots, that the web series wasn't just specifically created for that. However, there are pages and pages and pages of people who reported having played the game, having downloaded the clone version, the more graphic clone version, and then all of a sudden having an invasion of black-eyed kids. Only problem is the black-eyed kids were already inside your house.
Frig, no. I don't mess with that.
Right? There have been reports of people who create podcasts talking about it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, shadow people start to appear in their house. So just by us talking about this tonight,
stop! Can you not?
we are opening up.
Oh
To
my God, Dad.
So here's the deal. Clearly, this is something that never existed, and yet,
Can you not? Like, actually, why would you do that?
why would you do that? There's an actual
Oh my
weird.
God.
I think that this could be real, right? Like Ella is literally telling me to stop talking about it because this is the same girl who wanted to put an evil spirit inside of a Chuck E. Cheese doll and have them chase her
When I
around the
was 6
house.
years old, I didn't believe that.
Who's now that's the crazy part, right? That's like the urban legend part of it, is that clearly not ever existed. Like there's no proof it ever existed. There are all these whispers of like, and yet still those weird legends that come out at the end of this idea that it's not just infecting your computer. There's some kind of algorithm out there that catches people talking about it, and much like Herobrine sending a message saying stop, that all of a sudden people who experience this will start to see messages all around the place that say follow the trail. They'll start to get emails that say follow the trail. They'll get posts from random posters like on their social media that just say follow the trail, and when they click on the person's profile, it's nobody. It's like it had just been created. So this may not only be an episode about cursed games, this might be the most cursed episode of Tripping on Legends. We'll have to update you because we have run way over time. But we would love to know if you have ever played a cursed video game, if you've ever heard the legend of one of these stories, if you've ever seen The Last Starfighter or know where I can stream it, if you've ever seen The Bishop of Battle, which I love. I'm going to have to find out a way to rent that whole thing because I remember the whole thing being good. More importantly, if you know a local legend that you want us to look into to give the special Tripping on Legends treatment, please let us know. We are back in the swing of things. We are now, after kind of like a little bit of a year, almost like a year off, posting sporadically. I've got like 7 show ideas. I've got a potential new co-host that is not my daughter. That'll actually be hitting the field with me on some of these stories that I'm following up on. I would love to hear from you, which means you can feel free at any time you want to give us a call. Our number, well, I don't even know what it is right now, but I'll put it in the show notes. In addition to that, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/trippingonlegends. On Instagram, we were at Spooky Tripping. And then, of course, we also have, for however long the government allows, a TikTok channel, which is also Tripping on Legends. You can follow all our adventures, suggest your own, try to catch us. We have like 134. We have more like almost 200 episodes up on any platform where you get your podcast. So you really want to go back and get into some of those old ones. You can see kind of this huge difference between what the show was and what it is now, and kind of a different vibe. And tell us what we are doing. Feel free to review us. I am Christopher Balzano.
I'm Ella Balzano.
And here's hoping that all of your trips
Are legendary.
What do you want to show your Lego? She wants to show her Legos before we get out of the So I am stopping the audio on this.